Hello, and welcome to Retail Innovation Week. Now in its third year, Retail Innovation Week brings together change makers, business leaders, and practitioners to engage in a week of conversation around the future of retail. I'm your co-host, Piers Fawkes, and I'm excited to have you here on day 3. Day 3, the topic is purpose, and we're going to talk about themes including diversity, inclusivity, sustainability, and we're going to bring together a number of experts who can talk about those different aspects. To help you understand what's about to happen over the next 2 hours, we're going to interview experts at retailers, experts at brands who are pioneering change in retail. And then we're going to transition to breakout sessions where we have solution providers helping us understand how to really activate those strategies and to take us through case studies. So I'm going to bring on my colleague, Scott Latchett, to help us with the day. Scott.
Hi, Piers. Excited to be here today at Retail Innovation Week, talking about the theme of purpose. We've got a great lineup of speakers who are going to be talking about everything from diversity and inclusivity to environmental sustainability and building community. Let's take a look at who we've got lined up to speak today.
On this third day of Retail Innovation Week 2021, we will deep dive into the topics of purpose, sustainability, inclusivity, and the role of retailers and brands in the community. We have a busy day today, so here is a quick overview of the experts to listen out for. Social impact marketer Afdal Aziz will be discussing the big themes found in his new book, The Principles of Purpose, and he'll share his thoughts on what it means to be a purpose-driven brand in 2021. Maggie Huro leads social impact at Harry's and will talk about her work partnering with nonprofit organizations to ensure that men who need mental health care can get access to it. We will talk to Helena Price Hambrecht about engaging communities with her new beverage brand house, especially during the pandemic. The leadership team at Seedlip Drinks will discuss the role of nature and how it fits into the broader mission of the company, including its impact on packaging choices. Ava Goikachia will be talking about the big taboos and obstacles that she's attempting to overcome with her brand Maud, and also the big consumer attitudinal shifts that she's most excited about. Ezen Okoro is the Global Chief of Inclusion, Equity and Diversity at Wunderman Thompson, and she will discuss the important steps companies should be taking to create a more equitable and inclusive culture. Brian Dodge of Reela will be talking more about how retailers are adjusting to deliver sustainability, inclusivity, and purpose. Kelly Cobb is the VP of Community and Giving at Bombers will be discussing the process of community building and the key ways that Bombers is leveraging to engage its community. Carla Gallardo is going to discuss how her brand has been built on top of a circular product lifecycle, where she and her team have rethought every stage in the product and customer journey.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our first speaker.
So for folks who don't know Reela as an organization, can you give us a little bit of an overview of the way that Reela works with retail partners to help them, navigate an ever-changing marketplace?
Sure. We represent only the largest retailers operating in the United States. So there's a number of the most recognized brands that are represented behind me, and there's many, many more that we represent. And we work with them a variety of ways. The most relevant to today's conversation is that we maintain about 45 different communities of peers across these member companies. So think about heads of supply chain, asset protection, HR, diversity and inclusion, digital officers, CEOs and CFOs, about 45 of those communities. And they are at the heart of really everything that we do. We bring those communities together to identify common challenges and bring a variety of resources into those discussions to try to make progress on those things like research, traditional dialogue, partner dialogue, sometimes government affairs when the issues can be resolved that way. And through those communities and that working format, we have a really good sense of what's on the minds of retail companies today. So what are the most pressing issues for all those key communities? And then what are the priorities among all of those?
What were some of the big challenges that you were hearing from your members and some of the things that they were really dealing with?
Yeah, it was a fascinating year. Certainly an opportunity for me and my team to learn an awful lot about how businesses deal with crises. But of course, the year started off with this faraway challenge, a supply chain issue in China called coronavirus that was going to impede products from making their way here to the US to reach store shelves. Well, that quickly became a domestic consideration in late February and then March, when it really took hold, and we had a severe crisis on our hands within the industry, and of course, as a country, as a world, frankly, given the scale of the issue. What was fascinating during those early days was we had truly within our membership the haves and the have-nots. You had the businesses that were deemed to be essential. I don't really like that terminology, but I'll use it because it's commonplace, who were dealing with enormous supply chain problems. How do you keep store shelves filled when people were trying to stock up? Hoard buying was a huge issue. And so how do you keep up with that demand as people live at home, work at home, educate at home, all the different things that suddenly happen? And on the other hand, you had businesses that were just told they had to close, and they were trying to figure out how to preserve their businesses to get to the other side. And that triage lasted for a solid 3 weeks. And the businesses got their sea legs beneath them, and then we're pushing ahead through recovery. And where we are now is really into the transforming what the industry is focused on. But there were, as you noted, a cascading series of other crises that sort of we faced along the way as well. And as I look back on the year, whether it was a George Floyd killing in Minneapolis or any number of other challenges, the sort of return of coronavirus and follow-up spikes, the thing that was most fascinating with the discussions that we had with our executives is that we always wound up talking about people. We started talking about nuanced operational issues and technical challenges they were facing. But not long into the conversation, we were talking about, what did the team need? What did customers need? How can we respond to that? And the conversations, which we should talk about a bit more, were fascinating and I think really reveal the heart of the industry and where we're going.
I love that focus on people. I think it's something that we hear about and see in our research is how do you make yourself a customer-centric organization, and then also thinking about the employee experience in so many ways. And obviously what we've seen again and again is how important employees are at the front line, obviously, and then just throughout an organization to actually allow you to be nimble and meet all of these challenges. So thinking about those conversations, has it shifted any of your efforts or the priorities from an organizational standpoint?
Well, for me personally, I think for RELA, it has forced us to probe deeper into these types of questions when we bring these communities together so that we can bring to the surface those considerations. But we have seen issues, the compilation of ESG related issues have really elevated this year. And they were prominent going into 2020, but the circumstances of this year have only elevated them further. Because while there was a lot of attention paid to public statements about the importance of the interests of a variety of stakeholders beyond just shareholders, retailers and other businesses this year, I think, demonstrated that on a higher level, and rightfully so. The expectations that are placed on them from those key stakeholder audiences have only increased, whether that's through their expectations around how they're treating the environment, and we can talk about kind of the drivers behind that, or human capital management, how you treat people. I mean, there's just a new set of expectations that are based on the greater understanding about the role that businesses are willing to play and capable of playing.
Yeah. Let's dig into some of those issues in a little bit more depth. Sustainability obviously is something that I know is one of RELA's sort of key initiatives. What are some of the ways that you're sort of stepping in and providing leadership and support to the partners that you're working with?
Sure. At a high level, what I would say for the retailers themselves is we're probably on the third or fourth iteration of their focus on sustainability. It started as a cost reduction area of focus around reducing waste through limiting packaging and things of that sort. We're now at the point where it is a holistic view of their entire footprint beyond just the four walls of their store or the lengths of their supply chain. It's all of their partners. So they think about the entirety of the product life cycle. How can they make sure that everything that they're doing is thought through from a sustainability standpoint? And the reason that they've gotten to this point is that it's no longer viewed as a reputational issue. It's business continuity, it's performance, it's generating sales. We know that consumers are devoting more of their wallet share towards companies that reflect their values. And we know that these issues matter to people. So when we bring our members together, we talk about it that way. And we look for ways to help them understand ways that they can unlock more opportunity. A good example of that would be in energy management. So every business wants to find new and creative ways and affordable ways to find renewable energy. We have worked with partners to encourage states to enable a more competitive renewable energy market within their states, thus driving down the cost of renewables and giving more access to businesses like ours to take advantage of that. That's one example. There's two pieces of that, of course, is engaging with government, but there's working with the members to understand exactly what their needs are and communicating that to those lawmakers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love when the conversation can elevate to a level where the sort of businesses recognize that these shifts are a competitive advantage and not just, window dressing, let's say, but they're sort of essential for, creating sustainable businesses. So I think that's fantastic.
Because if it's not viewed that way, it's a nice to have, not a got to have, right?
Yeah.
It will never get the commitment that it deserves if it's viewed entirely as a reputational type effort.
Yeah, and it's so, I think nowadays, at least, in a lot of the conversations that we're having, it's, there's this sort of assumption that it's table stakes, but I think there's like so many, there's a much more nuanced way to think about it as a business and what that actually means at all these different levels. So I think it's really great to sort of hear that is like resonating. And then, the diversity I know is another big sort of, perhaps even larger area of focus given everything that we mentioned, or that sort of happened. You mentioned the murder of George Floyd, bringing Black Lives Matter sort of up to the forefront. So talk about some of the work there that you're doing and the support that you provide as well.
Sure. So we set down the path of helping our members advance their D&I practices now almost 3 years ago. Really grateful that we had a head start on it because the issues, of course, really came to the front this year. Our focus there was similar to what we just talked about around sustainability, was to start with the understanding that diversity and inclusion is a business issue. In fact, it's a business imperative. And so we built out a program with our members that focused on 4 key areas that we could work with them on. Now it's grown further, but I want to start where we started because I think it's important. We focused on the 4 things. The first was defining the business case for diversity and inclusion, not at the corporate level, companies had already done that, but all the way down to the smallest teams. So business leaders knew if they did D&I well, what were the benefits that they were going to see from it? Because that would engender that commitment. The second was engendering organization-wide participation. How do individuals know what their role is and how are they held accountable to it? Now, their role might just be make sure that the people who you work with can be their authentic selves at work, but everybody should know what that is. Intentional succession planning around diversity and inclusion, which is a pretty straightforward point. And then the last was societal impact. Businesses that do diversity and inclusion well should be comfortable talking about it. They should also be capable of doing an analysis of the range of issues that fall into D&I or the more broad social oriented issues that they should be prepared to be proactive on or reactive on based on analysis of their stakeholders. And that's really where we started. We started with about 12 companies focused on these issues. We're now over about 60 companies. So anybody who may be listening who wants to get involved, we'd love to have you because the community there has been incredibly valuable in 2020 as companies have tried to navigate all that has been thrown at them in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's such an important conversation and one that I think is, it's overdue in many ways. I'd love to dig in a little bit and just understand what some of those, I think I have some assumptions about the business benefits of diversity, but some of the things that you've kind of uncovered to make those business cases for why this is so important.
Sure. We go down a lot of different paths here, but I'll keep it simple. If you're if the individuals who are making decisions about the products that you sell on your shelves are reflective of or have an understanding of your customers, they'll make better decisions. If those people maybe you've hired the right people, but they don't feel like they can bring the insights from their own life experiences into the conversation, then you won't have the opportunity to get the full value of their insights. I think about, one of the mistakes that we always make, I'm guilty of it myself, is that we rely on resumes to evaluate candidates for jobs and hire them. But when you really think about the team that's around you, it is rarely the things that show up on their resume that are most useful in discussions within the business. So how do you get at those richer experiences? How do you build a team where people complement each other, right? A whole bunch of people with the exact same training, even if it's exemplary, are going to produce a subpar product. You want people who have a variety of different insights and experiences who can bring those to the table, whether that's in merchandising, in supply chain, in just direct interactions with customers. These are the ways that you get it done. And I can't help but reinforce one thing. Diversity and inclusion, sometimes I think people think it's one word, right? It's one word, it's one thing. It is really two distinct things: diversity and inclusion. Diversity, as I think about it, and I'm oversimplifying it, is sort of changing the class photo. Inclusion is doing everything you can to allow people to bring their rich experiences to their jobs. And if you do both of those things, you've got some magic. If you do one and not the other, you haven't gained much at all.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk about it, because I think it's like it's creating an environment that group of individuals can be empowered to do the best job. And I love that it's kind of come back to that focus on people as well, which is what we talked about at the beginning. As we look ahead, and you think about some of the things that are perhaps percolating now, I'd love to understand, 2 or 3 things that you think retailers should have as sort of priorities in 2021 and beyond.
Great question. I think I'd go back to the basics. The most important thing that a business can do is understand its stakeholders and understand them really, really well. What do the stakeholders expect of them? So this gets to brand positioning in every business. Of course, the large businesses we represent think about this all the time. But where are the places where they can be public on key issues that are relevant to their stakeholders? And where do they have to be prepared to speak if the situation demands that they do so? And that leads to the second point, which I think is really important. It's look for ways to be absolutely authentic. Customers understand inauthentic experiences or inauthentic actions, and they'll sniff them out right away. So having a deep understanding of that sort of matrix of stakeholders and what's expected of you and how you have decided to be present in the world will allow you to be authentic, and you should do that. You may be accused of being inauthentic at times, but plow ahead, persevere. And then the last thing is, 2020 taught us that that there's an incredible opportunity for collaboration. RILA is one place where businesses have come together to learn from each other and teach one another. I would encourage businesses to do that. Come join RILA, but join places where you have a peer group. Because the opportunity to learn, to deepen your experiences and bring others along is incredibly rich, and it would be a shame for them to miss out on it.
That's amazing. I think these are great lessons. I love that idea of I guess it's being open, not feeling as though you need to participate in every single issue or conversation that's happening. I think especially now it's the tendency to want to be reactive, but having that understanding and being smart about what role you play and where. And then I love that idea of collaboration and partnerships. I think these are great lessons to take forward. So Brian, thanks for taking the time to share with us today.
We can't run Retail Innovation Week without the support of partners who we truly appreciate. We wouldn't be here today. Let's have a look at some of the partners that are supporting us today.
We couldn't have pulled this event off without the support of our sponsors. First, we have Avalara, the leader in automated tax compliance. We've done a lot of work with Avalara over the past 12 months. And it continues the launch of a new report we are unveiling on Day 4 of Retail Innovation Week. It is called Marketplaces and the Next Generation Digital Experience, Developing an Omnichannel Marketplace Strategy. The report was the inspiration for our Marketplace Day, and we hope you download your free copy. We'd also like to thank Gladly for their support. Gladly is the only people-centered customer service platform with all the channel built in. We also want to give a shout out to our Breakout sponsors. Chase Design is a world-class design firm established more than 50 years ago with over 100 employees. They work with consumer product goods companies and retailers worldwide on projects that span all shopper touchpoints, in the home, on the go, in store, and online. Our sponsors. Real Obsess and Ridding Futures ran a session on Monday that tackled how to make the in-store experience available anywhere with AR and VR. Between them, they bring to the table technology, insights, augmented retail, and virtual shopping. We are also supported by Life Area, a full-service global customer experience and commerce agency. Their expertise lies in connecting brands and people through creative commerce experiences that transform and enliven the customer journey from start to finish. Much of what you will see on days 3 and 4 was filmed with our partner, Norbert. Norbert is a turnkey, all-in-one hardware and software solution you can deploy in hours. Thanks again to all of our sponsors for their support of Retail Innovation Week.
So as you can see, Retail Innovation Week is supported by some amazing partners, and I recommend that you check them out, engage them, find out how they drive the future of retail too.
Before the break, I had an opportunity to speak with Afdel Aziz from Conspiracy of Love. He shared some amazing insights from his latest book. Let's turn to that conversation now and hear what he had to say.
Great to be here.
Well, excited to have you here, Afdel, and let's just jump into it. So just as a first question here, I know you published a book back in 2016 called Good is the New Cool, which was a framework for becoming a purpose-driven brand. We're 5 years in roughly from that original publication, and I'm just curious to know what some of the big changes are that you've seen from a consumer and industry point of view.
Sure, Scott, thanks for having me. So Good as the New Cool came out in 2016. This was before Pepsi and Kendall Jenner. This was before Nike and Colin Kaepernick, before this idea that brands should really stand for something good and not just for something cool, hence the title of the book, was really a mainstream idea. And what's been fascinating is seeing the speed and kind of acceleration of how it's gone from being something niche to now becoming quite front and center, the expectations. I think it's come about because a lot of consumers are very jaded by the claims brands make. And they kind of see through the facade that brands have used in the past to kind of just position themselves as being, culturally relevant. They're looking for proof. One of the principles in the book is brands need to back up the promise with the proof. So I think the biggest shift we've seen is that consumers aren't taking brands at face value. When they make a claim about supporting Black Lives Matter or being sustainable, they really do their homework. They really interrogate the brand. And if the brand doesn't have a convincing enough set of proof to back up their claims, that's really when they have the risk of being torn apart. So I think the opportunities is bigger than ever before, because more and more consumers are conscious and thinking about how to vote with their wallets, as we say. But the downside risk is also big for those brands who don't do it authentically as well.
So now you're publishing a new book, which I suppose is maybe the next iteration in that. It's called The Principles of Purpose. How are you sort of approaching the topic differently in the context of this book?
Sure. So the follow-up is called Good is the New Cool, The Principles of Purpose. And if book one, Market Like You Give a Damn, was how to create a purpose-driven brand, book two is how to create a purpose-driven company. We saw major announcements like 181 of America's biggest corporations, from Amex to Apple to Amazon, saying in the Business Roundtable purpose of a corporation statement that they wanted to transform their companies into being more ethical and more sustainable. And we realized there wasn't a guidebook for CEOs. There wasn't a path that they could follow to transform their companies into being purpose-driven ones. Much like 10 years ago, they were challenged to transform their companies into being digital companies. And so we set out to write that book, myself and Bobby Jones, my co-author and business partner in Conspiracy of Love, our social impact consultancy. We used our time advising some of these companies like AB InBev or Diageo or Mondelez on how to transform themselves authentically into purpose-driven ones, into a set of 9 principles that leaders can follow in order to do it right, ranging from purpose must start inside out, which is really about getting your own house in order before you start going out there and preaching to the world, to the idea that purpose must be profitable to be scalable. This is business, not philanthropy. So it's important to build a business case for doing good inside a company and measure the ROI of it in really kind of stringent ways as well. So it's really trying to now lay out the groundwork for all of these companies who are grappling with conscious consumers, conscious employees, and how to embrace purpose is really the next big competitive advantage.
I really love the sort of ability to kind of tie that into revenue and, seeing that as a, I guess like as a way of growing your business. I think that's like a great way of thinking about it. Just to sort of expand a little bit then, within the context of this book and the work that you've been doing, does it mean something different to be a purpose-driven brand in 2021?
I think so, especially given the results of COVID and the wake of Black Lives Matter. All the data that we are seeing show that consumer expectations of companies and brands have never been higher in helping to solve some of these giant societal issues, working alongside government, of course, but now really kind of partnering with them in new and unique ways to solve not just the present set of problems, but the structural inequities that caused them in the first place. And it's embedded in this idea, that's been kind of popularized around building it back better. Even before COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter this summer, we had the biggest systemic inequality on the planet. 2,000 billionaires owned as much as the bottom 4.6 billion people on the planet, 60% of the wealth. That is insane. And of course, the specter of the climate crisis. And what's been fascinating is that in this new era that we're in, not only is there an expectation for corporations and brands to get involved in helping solve some of the current issues, but to really then think about how we can remake this system to make it more sustainable, more just, more fair, more ethical as well. So we're really in a watershed moment, I believe. And coming out of this year, I think the expectations and the opportunities as well for brands are really kind of groundbreaking.
With that as a bit of a backdrop, I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that brands are externalizing some of this messaging, and obviously marketing is one of those ways. And I'm curious to get your point of view. How do we move from corporate lip service to something that's much more meaningful and authentic in terms of these purpose-driven messages that brands are putting into the marketplace?
Yeah, I get this question all the time, right? How do you tell the difference between purpose washing and corporate lip service and authentically doing things? And I frame it somewhat differently. I look at all these brands who made claims, for example, this summer around Black Lives Matter. And my view is that they've actually now started a process that they have to finish. By publicly making a commitment, it's actually a good thing. That they now have to kind of back up their, we call it back up the promise with the proof. So a terrific example of this happening in retail is the 15% pledge started by Aurora James, challenging major retailers to devote 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. It's incredible to see companies like Macy's stepping in and say, okay, we're going to do this. Now that is a systemic fix to a systemic problem, right? It's not just a social media post. It's saying, if we actually do this, if we devote the same amount of shelf space to Black-owned businesses as we have, Black customers, then that causes an economic shift on a fundamental basis. And if you imagine that same idea now rippling across all of American retail, like it seems to be happening, now that is actually a profound way of solving a problem that goes beyond corporate lip service. So I see it as kind of corporations throwing their hat over the wall, to use the metaphor, and now having to go retrieve that hat and kind of, to actually, show the proof of what they're doing.
That's pretty exciting, actually. And I mean, do you feel, you touched on it, but that consumers are holding brands much more accountable now today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. To an almost kind of incredible to comprehend rate, right? So nowadays, when a brand announces something that it's doing, what is fascinating to see is half the country damn it for being too much, and the other half damn it for being too little. And so your brands are in this state where they're kind of damned if they don't, right? Silence is violence, as the saying goes. The complicity is assumed if you don't stand up on issues which are really important. But they're also in this situation where they might get judged for not doing enough to help solve the problem. And our advice to our clients, with Conspiracy of Love, the impact consultancy, is do not be paralyzed waiting for perfection. You are never going to be a perfect company. You are never going to have everything in place with diversity and inclusion, sustainability. Do not let that lack of perfection paralyze you. Choose progress over perfection. As long as you are honest and humble and open and acknowledge that you are not perfect, people will give you the benefit of the doubt, and so that's where really we kind of say you have to embrace, purpose as the new digital. It's a great quote from one of the thinkers in the space, Max Lenderman, and it's a great analogy. Companies had a choice 10 years ago to start embracing becoming digital, and those that were able to do it first reap the benefits. We are in that exact same moment in terms of this purpose economy that is coming. Those companies that take the time to really embrace it, like the competitive advantage that it is, are going to be much better positioned. But in order to do that, you have to kind of start using your purpose muscles. You have to make some mistakes. You have to get out there and learn how to do it. And I think that's what we encourage people to think about it as a journey, not a destination.
Well, that's our time for today. I really appreciate you sitting down with us. This was fantastic. When is your book already out, or when does it hit the stand, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's available for pre-order now. If you go to goodisthenewcool.com, you can sign up for it. It should be out in late January.
Throughout today's conversation, don't forget to use the chat below. Leave your comments, ask your questions. We want to have a great community conversation, as well as the folks from Retail Innovation Week will be adding relevant links that the speakers are talking about as well. Obviously, in today's climate, words like diversity and inclusivity are more important than ever before, both within the context of internal culture at organizations, and then how that shows up for their consumers. So I am very excited to be joined by Ezine Okoro from Wunderman Thompson, who will help me touch on some of these topics and share some best practices for how this all comes to life within an organization, and how that shows up ultimately for everyone and consumers as well. So Ezine, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you, Scott. And thanks for everyone for joining and listening to this very important conversation that we're going to have today.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have it. So let's start by talking about your current job title, which is Global Chief Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity Officer. Number one, that is an incredible job title. I'm very jealous. Talk to me a little bit about what the core responsibilities are of that role.
I know it's such, whenever I hear the title myself, I'm like, whoa, is this me? It's definitely a big title, and it comes with a huge responsibility, I think, just for the agency, for the employees, and really for the industry as well too. So I take it very seriously and with complete humility to be able to lead such an effort for such a large organization. And really, and the funny, ironic thing is, I'm actually not really into titles. I'm the person that's kind of like completely like throw the ego out the door. Anyone can talk to me. Like, it's just kind of like, how can we relate and how can I support you in your experience? But really, at the core, my role is to support the business in actualizing their goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And really, what does that mean is, how do they make sure that they are attracting and retaining top talent from diverse backgrounds? How are they showing up for their clients and their clients' customers when we're talking about creative technology, communications, et cetera, and truly supporting the executive team and making sure that they're creating an equitable space for everyone that works with them. I mean, I think that there's two things that are really important to any organization. It's your people and it's your revenue. And the interesting thing is, you can't have one without the other. So as we're focusing on business strategy and how to be sustainable and how to bring profits in and how to continue to be continue to grow, it's the same thing from the people perspective. How do you continue to get the best of the best? And that's what diversity and inclusion and equity is all about. It's really getting the best of the best, keeping them, and making sure everyone has a sense of belonging in that space. So really the role, as much as I'm the one leading it, everyone is part of that journey and everyone has a voice in it and everyone is just as responsible as I am. I just happen to be the face of the change, really.
That's amazing. And that, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also would imagine, based on the way that you're sort of talking about the role, that your work is directly shaping the sort of makeup of the organization. And I would imagine that either indirectly or directly impacts the work that the external outputs of the agency. Are you vetting that work, or is that just through the actual, makeup of the organization that therefore there's an expectation that?
Yeah, I think in the perfect world, especially with my personality, I would love to vet every single project and piece of work that we're doing, right? But the reality is, one person cannot be the person responsible to doing that. So the way that I come in is, I am supporting the team with tools and a framework and really giving them the ability to identify certain blind spots and enhancing their ways of working to make sure that they're always thinking about what's missing, what are we not addressing, or are we amplifying a particular stereotype that we don't want to? How is this going to connect to someone that does not look like me? How does this connect to maybe my target audience, but even broader than that? Because the goal is always to bring in a new audience, right? So really the way that I'm supporting them in doing that is to make sure that, one, they have a confidant, they have someone that they can come to if they're really struggling and challenging and just not really sure where to place things. And then two, making sure that they have the skill set and the toolkits in order to go forward. So I think, like I mentioned before, the work is not singular, right? It's not just stuck in one department or one individual. In order for it to truly be sustainable, we all have to take a role in it. So for me, success looks like is when someone, let's say, Scott, you were creating something and you're like, you know what? I think this is good, but I'm not 100% sure. So let me just double check with Esna and her team. And that's what I want. I want you to have that. Let me just double check, right? Let me just make sure, so that what we can now say is, well, we had a diverse group of people to look at this project and we feel comfortable. And the reality though is, you're not always going to get it 100% right. But if the process in place makes sense, and you're doing your due diligence, you have a higher chance, if you do calculated risk, right? You have a higher chance of landing it perfectly than you do of creating something that will be harmful to yourself, to the business, or to your teams later on.
Awesome. I love that sort of notion of, like you were saying, the sort of framework or process in place in order to sort of make sure that you're at least going through the proper steps, and ideally you're going to come out with the best result. And then also the fact that you're sort of creating this ownership culture where people feel that they are, have a role and then can also, elevate that or have that sort of bigger conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I never want someone to feel like I am the start and the end to anything related to inclusion, equity, and diversity, right? I happen to be the person that is leading and driving it. But if I decide to leave tomorrow, the work still needs to be carried forward, right? And change is about, like, I didn't, like if you think about culture, you didn't build the culture by yourself. I didn't build the culture by myself. So in order for us to change the culture, we all have to be part of that equation.
So from a best practices point of view, obviously we have a bunch of folks in the audience who are from agencies, who are from retailers, who are from brands. What are some of the things that any organization should be doing as they think about advancing some of these ideas of equity and inclusivity, and even like bringing transparency and accountability into play, like maybe just a few ideas that you have for them?
Yeah, yeah. Scott, what's interesting is I actually struggle sometimes with the word best practices when it comes to inclusion, equity, and diversity. And I know there's several people that would debate on me with this, but if you can hear me out, I think for me, what happens is I feel like sometimes if you use that term, it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel genuine, right? It kind of feels like, okay, well, we're trying to check off a box to make sure that we're doing something right and that everyone is going to agree with it. And that's not really the reality. The reality that it's such a heart and brain activity that yes, there are baseline things that I will provide in a second, but a part of it too is also understanding your organization and your team and where you are and how you sit in. There's some that are going to be like, have absolutely zero, we barely even say whatever, like we barely, we have like zero representation of the LGBTQ plus community, or we're barely comfortable saying disability, whatever it may be. And then you have those that are actively changing and have 50% equity, et cetera, et cetera. So to use and I guarantee that the process for both is very different. So I think using best practices can be a little bit challenging, but I do think what companies can start off with, very, very baseline, anyone can do it. I don't care if you have $0 in your budget, is a journey of just self-awareness. Really take an inventory to understand, okay, where the hell are we? Like, let's look around the room, let's look at our data. Let's be honest with ourselves as to where we are. And that type of self-reflection goes such a long way because it opens up your eyes to like, oh, wow, I really thought we were doing an amazing job, but I see that we're falling short. And when you're able to identify that and say that and be honest with yourself and your executive team about that, then the real work goes on, right? Because then if someone comes in, whether it's myself or a consultant, et cetera, and say, I don't agree with this, we need to change this, let's enhance this, let's take this out, you're not startled because you've already did the initial step to understand, what, we're really not where we need to be. So the first thing I would say is reflection. The second thing is awareness, is really taking inventory as to what is the noise and the climate in your company. And that's, a lot of people use focus groups, they use listening tours. I think it's so important and amazing for CEOs to be part of that. And I know that they're getting their time can be very challenging, but if your CEO or someone in your executive team can at least be in a couple of those sessions, it lands so incredibly well, and they become so invested because people are sharing their personal stories on how they're lacking equity in their business. And no CEO wants to hear that. They don't want to hear that their employee doesn't want to be here. They don't want to hear that. So I think reflection, awareness, and then start to figure out what's the plan. And that plan of it, which we can call best practice, or we can call your strategy, your framework, your tools, that's going to take longer to do. that's a very fluid process. It will change. Things will move around because of where you initially are. But I do think it's so powerful when we just take the time to say, well, you know what, like I have a problem. We have a problem and we need to solve it. Just do that. And that's going to take a long way. And then your employees are going to appreciate that honesty, that transparency, and then they're going to hold you accountable to that information.
That's amazing. And I think that makes total sense, understanding that it's going to be different for every organization, but starting from that place of being open to change, number one, and then recognizing that it's an ongoing process that's going to continually be changing, I think as well is extremely important. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess one last question is, we've focused a lot on thinking about sort of internal culture and what that means for organizations themselves. Obviously, within the advertising agency world or within the retail world, there's a lot of that, actually going out and showing up for consumers and communities. And so often, obviously, that's depending on how an organization approaches that, it can fall flat or it cannot feel authentic.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that organizations can create sort of these positive changes in a way that is actually helpful?
Yeah. No, I think that's such a, it's always an interesting conversation because I think companies want to do well and they want people to know that they're doing well because they want the customers, they want the clients, they want the recognition, rightfully so. I think in making sure that it feels super genuine is really making sure that in-house, they also know what you're doing and what you stand for. Because I think a lot of times companies forget your employees are your ambassadors first, right? They are your first ambassadors. They're your first champions. They're your first customers. They're your first clients. So it's really important that they buy in to the strategy, to the commitment, to your transparency. And then when you are now taking something externally facing, or you're making a statement, I think a lot of companies made statements for Black Lives Matter, and some of them got the backlash from it. And they got the backlash because in-house, their employees were like, I've never believed this. Like, where did this come from? We've never even mentioned anything regarding race or equality or anything. And that's the downfall that I think a lot of companies make is that big mistake where they're really quick to pull the trigger when it comes to the external facing things and need to make sure that they recognize what's going on internally. And your employees, trust me, if you're doing things the right way, when you release statements such as that, or how I mentioned the campaign for Avon, they will rally behind it so quickly. And then that word of mouth spreading information, which is what we love, because that's how you organically spread messaging, it will just happen so naturally, right? So I think that it's really important to make sure that if you're sending out a press release or a whatever it is, figure out a way to kind of socialize that internally and say, we are super proud of this project. We are super proud of this partnership. You can learn more information here. And then boom, the next morning, it happens to be external. And I'm saying that specifically by experience as well, too, because I remember a couple of years ago, I was pulling the trigger very quickly on external projects. And I would have employees come to me and say, it would be really great if we knew that that was happening because we would love to support it. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like, you're absolutely right. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I'm like committed to making sure that we find avenues to make sure that we share so that we can bring our champions and ambassadors with us too, because your employees are your biggest assets.
That's amazing. And I think that's a great way to end the conversation is, again, like thinking about that sort of the flow of that voice sort of working both directions and the importance of that within the organization. And I love that idea of making your employees feel like they are empowered and that they're, can speak on behalf of the company, obviously in the right ways and
Right.
etc. But
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Well, Esene, thank you so much. This has been a very enlightening conversation for me, and I hope for the audience as well. You have a big job, and I know it seems like you are well equipped to handle. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone for tuning in. And like I tell everyone, regardless of whatever your title is, your contribution to creating a space of inclusion, equity, and diversity is critical and is warranted and is welcomed. So please continue to utilize your voice and for change.
So Maggie, thank you so much for joining us at Retail Innovation Week, and hope you're doing well.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So maybe as a little bit of context at the beginning, you can just talk about your role at Harry's and explain, some of the things that Harry's is doing for its community.
So I have what I think is the best job at Harry's, and I'm the head of social impact, which means, like, I guess if we take a step back, like, I get to think about all the good that we can do in the world as a company every day. So personally, I think that's the best gig at Harry's Inc. And when we think about, Harry's Inc., just to sort of describe our structure, has the Harry's brand underneath it, our Flamingo brand, which is our women's brand. We have Cat Person, which is our cat brand, and then we'll also start to grow. And the way that we sort of view social impact is that every brand has its own social impact story and its cause area. But as a whole, and as being part of Harry's Inc., every brand has a few things in common. One of which is that 1% of all sales, not profits, not proceeds, are donated to nonprofit organizations. And that our team is given a significant amount of time in the US, are given 5 paid days, in the UK are given 2 paid days to give back to organizations of their choice. So when you think about social impact, that's how we think about it at Harry's Inc. I think it's, we've decided that we can do well as a business and do good in the world at the same time. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. And we can tell some really compelling stories through our brands about cause areas that we're really passionate about. For today's conversation, we'll probably be focusing on Harry's brand. It's our most mature brand, but also has definitely the most mature social impact program, where we're laser focused on men's mental health right now.
Amazing. So, just taking a step back a little bit, as you kind of reflect back on everything that sort of went down in 2020, things like, empathy and support were, hugely important in terms of how kind of brands were showing up for consumers. And, I wonder if, if you've seen the role of brands kind of changing during that time, and what your sort of thoughts are there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We saw a huge shift, I think, in how brands are talking to their customers. Like, all of a sudden, overnight, what felt like overnight, when COVID-19 really hit, like, you couldn't talk to your customers in the same way, right? Like, how are we able to post on social media about body wash right now? It just seems so insignificant compared to what was going on in the world. And when we look back on 2020 and see what I consider like two pretty huge crises happening, one was the pandemic, and then the murder of George Floyd, and the BLM movement afterwards. I think those were two particular moments that really stood out, and the way that brands responded and talked to their customers. And these were opportunities. This was an opportunity, I think, to dig deeper into, how do you already do this work? So for us, we had actually already been talking about mental health for years, a couple of years, actually. We had shifted our focus and talking to men about men's mental health. So I think, where we saw I think a lot of success was leaning back into what we knew and what we had fluency in talking about. I think if you have fluency as a brand talking about marginalized communities, talking about ways that you give back, talking about, maybe statistics around the need and cause areas, I think those things it was really easy for brands to talk about that and build off of their existing programs. I think where you saw, challenges were folks that had never really supported other nonprofit organizations, had no idea what that looks like, sort of giving blindly, not even knowing could you use their logo or not. Those are the things that you saw like pop up. And for us, since we've had some pretty significant experience with partnering with nonprofit organizations, it was an opportunity for us to lean in a little bit more. For what we did in our response, we had a bunch of different responses, but some of the highlights I think for us were during the pandemic. What we were finding was that we actually don't donate our products, generally speaking, mostly because we donate so much through our 1% already. We don't find our products to actually fit a need usually. Generally, like razors aren't going to save the world. But what we were finding in this circumstance was that in order for folks to wear their N95 masks in order to get what they call good seal, you actually did need to shave. So we found that donating a product served a really good need. So we donated $1 million worth of product, 500,000 just in New York City alone, which at the time was like the heart of the pandemic. That has shifted and changed since. So that's what we did immediately. We knew that was something that we could provide and actually like have an impact. So we wanted to do that right away. And then we started to talk to our customers in a different way. How do we provide our custom crisis text line through our partnership with Crisis Text Line so that folks had resources to mental health or had access to mental health immediately? And then around, I think, the BLM movement and what happened after the murder of George Floyd, we were able to donate $500,000 to organizations that were providing mental health for the Black community right now. So for us, we didn't want to just blindly give to organizations that we had no intent of working with in the future. We actually want to continue to work with these organizations. They're fantastic. They're meeting a need, a huge need right now. So we were able to donate almost, within a week or so, and give impactfully to programs that we intend on funding in the future too.
Maybe we can just sort of dive into, this sort of notion of mental health specifically as it relates to Harry's. Why is it important to have a very clear focus in terms of what you're doing as a brand?
Yeah. So if we go back a little bit here, I think our social impact has had a ton of different forms throughout the years at Harry's and evolve with the way that our brand has evolved, which I think makes sense. And when I came about 3-ish years ago, I came to Harry's. I was actually a nonprofit partner before I came to Harry's, so I had been working with Harry's from the beginning. But when I officially came on board, where we were donating was to organizations that were helping promote positive masculinity, which I think is everything for what our brand stands for. Hopefully you see that in all of our brand messaging. But when I came, and I think we were ready to really focus in on one area in particular, because we were trying to talk about masculinity. Masculinity is really tough to talk about, and is it really a cause area? Is it something to own? Are there like strong statistics and research around it? And right now, I think there isn't. And when we were having these conversations with our nonprofit partners and trying to really dig into like, what is the challenge of men today? What is truly the biggest challenge? Because that's our customer base, right? Mostly men. When we started to dig into that a little bit more, like overwhelmingly what we were hearing over and over and over was men's mental health and access to men's mental health in particular. And so then it started to be like, okay, great, this is our focus area. How do we sort of refine it and make sure that we're reaching the right populations? And so when we started to dig into the research a little bit more, we found there are some populations that are disproportionately affected by men's mental health. So veterans, for example, we lose 22 veterans a day by suicide. LGBTQ folks, we were young men in particular. Suicide is the second biggest killer in the US. first biggest killer for men under 45. So these felt like this felt like, okay, this is the issue that's right for us, but then there's particular populations that we could really be reaching and meeting the need for immediately. And then after, I think, the Black Lives Matter movement, that shed a different light into like Black access to mental health care, and what we were seeing in this space, the underrepresentation right now in this space in general. Less than 5% of mental health professionals identify as Black, which is just is like not enough representation. So we felt like, okay, we could be funding some projects that make sure that folks get access to culturally competent therapists right now. So that was, generally what we need to refine and continue to find a focus. And for us, it just makes sense to stay focused in one area and one space. It allows us to talk to our customers in a different way about a cause area. And I think it's really important to have a focus. I think this is where, to our conversation earlier, I think where you saw folks struggle and chase after different cause areas and things that were important to them. And once all of a sudden you're a brand, you're talking about too many different issues, it's really hard to understand like what you stand for as a brand. And luckily for us, I think mental health is just like a cause area that applies for everyone. So I think we could really be reactive in those times of crises, because we were finding like everyone always needs mental health. So for us, it was really important to sort of focus in on those areas to be able to talk about it in a different and compelling way. And for the program model itself, there's enough need out in the world right now for men's mental health. Programs are wildly underfunded. And the more and more we dug into this cause area, the more we felt like this is a really great match for our brand.
Are there ways that brands or companies should be thinking about how they partner with nonprofits? Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a fantastic conversation, and good luck to you in 2021 as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, just coming back in for a second. I want to tell you about this networking feature, which is one of the buttons here on my right hand side. As you can see, the networking sessions have begun. What happens in networking is a little bit like speed dating. You can go into the session and it matches you with some clever AI technology, and it connects you to somebody else in the audience, and for up to 5 minutes you can have a chat. If you like each other, you find each other interesting, by the end of it you can exchange details, or you can move on to the next person. Don't be scared, it's all a lot of fun, and maybe you'll meet somebody who you'll enjoy the conversation and be a like mind, and you can talk about some of the elements of the session. Thanks, try it now.
In 2020, we saw the importance of things like wellness and community for consumers as they dealt with dramatic disruption taking place within the context of their day-to-day lives. And alongside that, community as well, and how important that is for brands to be able to sort of tap into and understand and support their consumers. Alongside of that, we have the sort of shifting retail landscape that brands are approaching. And we're going to touch on all of these topics today with our next guest, Eva Goicoechea, who is the founder of Mod.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you can just start off by helping us understand what Mod does as a company and some of the ways that you or what you're selling to your consumers.
Yeah, so Mod's a 2.5, will be 3 in April, a 2.5-year-old modern sexual wellness company that really was born out of this idea of changing the landscape for consumers in a product category that is so closely connected to sort of physical, mental well-being, and taking an approach that resonates more with a current audience. Because I think that if you look at this industry, it's been monopolized by sort of the same players for over 100 years. So we're a modern sexual wellness company based in New York, and I'm actually in the office right now.
Amazing. You are one of the rare people who are actually in an office right now. So that's good news for all of us, I hope. So we're in 2021, and I'm curious to know where you sort of like see the conversation around sexuality in sort of current society. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things that are going on, and what is the general sort of level of comfort, and what does it mean to be this sort of modern notion of sexuality today?
So I think even a few years ago, I got asked the question by somebody, because I started working on this in 2015, and I would even say then was too early to sort of position a company that is sexual wellness as sort of a general piece of your wellness. But over the past few years, I think that the discussion, whether it's because we exist or partially because we exist, has started to, the discussion has become reframing sexual wellness as a part of your everyday health. And for us, we sort of sit at an intersection between personal care and I would almost say like a beauty approach to sexual wellness. And that approach has really resonated with customers. So our customers are it's a pretty wide age range. We're a gender inclusive company. You see people from all over the country buying the product, and now Canada. And so I think we've resonated across those generations because it resonates with all of us to say like this is so much a part of your personal health and care. So that's, I would say, the new reframe, and whether or not older brands can position themselves that way, I don't know.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, it's obviously like a very loaded category because so much of it has been, sort of lurking in the shadows, and your approach to it is much more open and transparent and about, again, like reframing and sort of getting people to talk about it in a different way. And so I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious to know, like, what are you seeing or hearing from your consumers in terms of their approach to and comfort level of talking about this as well?
Well, I think where we see it the most is sort of in their consumption of our content. So, our tagline is modern intimacy, and the content spans like design and culture and history and health. And we're seeing them consume those angles equally. And I think that idea that it fits into your life and sort of, sex touches all of those things is something that is interesting, because in one way, if it's framed as sort of like love and romance, we all understand that. And that's something that we're very comfortable with, especially in like mainstream media. Cue the romantic comedy, although arguably there haven't been many romantic comedies that are well made in the past years. But sex feels like that's not been connected. And I would say our approach is very much saying like intimacy and love and sex are all part of the same thing. And so that's the feedback that we get.
I like that sort of idea of sort of situating it within the broader sort of culture too, and bringing in all these different kind of angles into having that conversation, and recognizing that, again, you're speaking to a consumer that has so many different interests and passions, etc., so that like it doesn't have to be this narrow conversation that you're having with them necessarily.
No, and I think that up to now it's been bifurcated where it's commoditized or it's stigmatized, and we're neither of those things.
Again, sort of talking about wellness specifically, how does that sort of come to life for consumers in terms of the product, or again, what it is that you're trying to sort of achieve as a company?
So when we launched with 4 products, and we really were saying, look, here are the essentials, and that includes a vibe, which we don't really call a toy. So a vibrator, condoms, and lubricants. And these were basics created to make you feel like you could have sort of your basic needs met. And over time, the intention was to broaden the category, and we were getting the feedback from the customer that that's what they wanted from us too. And so we went more into bath and body products, and the bath and body products are all meant to be shared or used alone. But like we have a pH balanced body wash that's great for everyday use, but is also good it's formulated to make a lot of bubbles and to be used as a bubble bath. So this idea of making intimacy sort of a broader category and thinking about it like your other personal care categories was something that was built into who we wanted to be and who we were going to become. And then in hearing the feedback from the customer, it sort of solidified that that's the direction that we should go.
How is that the way that you're reframing the conversation coming to life within that sort of shopping and or customer experience?
Well, so actually, I'm glad we're having a conversation during retail week because we're about 15%, wholesale. So we are in actually a lot of doors, and that sort of ranges anywhere from like an independent shop, whether that's like a beauty or design shop, all the way to bigger channels like we'll be in Nordstrom, and we've been in Urban Outfitters for a while and all of their sort of other brands. And we're in Indigo in Canada, which is an interesting one because it's a bookstore, but they also have a personal care section. And we've been resonating very well there. So what that means for us as a brand is that in putting us in these different places with this context around whether it's like being next to beauty or being in a design shop has allowed for sex to be this destigmatized thing and has allowed for us to understand where we're working. And so wholesale is a huge part of the future. And now it's just been testing out what are like brand aligned channels and partners for us. So I think it resonated more. I think it was easier for people to feel like they could walk in. And then it also cultivated great relationships with these brands. I would say behind the scenes, we now all know each other and can sort of activate each other's audiences. And it was really a good thing in that sense. So that happened. And then COVID came around and we were actually the winners of the Appear Here Space for Ideas. So we were supposed to have a store last year and we still have the retail space. It's now being rented out by another team. But we basically were like, well, we can't do anything offline. We've got to do something online. Let's get these brands back. They're all doing content that relates to being at home and taking care of yourself and your mental health and your physical health. And let's just call it Staycation Space. And so it's staycation.space. The line was, it was IRL. We took it URL and it was great. And it got some interesting press, but I think the point was like the angle that every brand was taking was sort of pretty similar.
So from a mod point of view, obviously you mentioned that in the initial incarnation, it was important to have those sort of adjacencies in order to, better situate your own product. And I wonder, what other sort of benefits have you just seen from those collaborations that you've had with these other brands?
I think it just creates this sense of one, it's sort of this shared language of understanding in terms of an easy to buy product and, sort of a comfortable, friendly brand. I think it creates all of these sort of signals of being really approachable that is really helpful for us because, I think as a category, and again, like we've had enough press and we've sort of been around long enough for people to understand where we're coming from. But I think if they're coming via those channels, via those other brands, it feels like it's creating sort of easy to understand ground for them to, sort of explore our brand. And that's really what it's about, is saying like, your toothpaste looks great now. Your mattress is great, but sex is just, we say it often, which is like, it's the last frontier. And we want to change that. So
Eva, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Good luck in 2021. And I hope to see you in IRL at some point in time down the road.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you.
So it's been an interesting day, kind of touching on a wide variety of topics related to the bigger theme of purpose. And one of the things that we haven't really touched on yet is the notion of sustainability within the context of business, particularly as we move more into an e-commerce or a direct-to-commerce kind of marketplace, and then just broadly how sort of environmental values come to life within the context of the brand. So to help kind of dive deep into some of these subjects, I have the pleasure of inviting Ben Branson, the founder and CEO of Seedlip, and Tom Hartfleet, his colleague, who is the head of nature at Seedlip as well. Guys, thanks so much for joining us at Retail Innovation Week.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
You are a non-alcoholic spirits brand, and Tom is the head of nature at the company. So maybe in introing your brand, you can also talk about why you created the head of nature role.
So Seedlip is the world's first distilled non-alcoholic spirits brand. We call ourselves a nature company that makes drinks. Nature is very close to my heart. It's part of my upbringing. My family have been farming for over 300 years in the north of England. So I love the natural world, and I grew up kind of around nature and value it a lot. And that's why we use a wonderful selection of real ingredients that we source from different farmers around the world to try and create delicious, grown-up, sophisticated non-alcoholic drinks. And given nature is so important to our drinks, our culture, our team, how we recruit, etc. 3 years ago, it felt like there was an opportunity to really lead that within the drink space, and create a role for Tom, who I'd already met and come across because he's an award-winning garden designer and was running the world's most prestigious garden design show and presented me with a gold medal for the garden that we designed as Seedlip. So started a set of kind of discussions around joining Seedlip as a head of nature.
And Tom, how do people respond when you tell them what your job title is?
As head of nature at Seedlip, I educate, agitate, and inspire the business to act with nature, with nature's best interests.
Ben, you talked about the farming being a part of your family history, and it's obviously quite foundational to the brand.
We're pretty aware that if there's no nature, there's no Seedlip, and that it means there's no business for us, and that for us in our jobs would be a real shame. And so then we can't give people decent non-alcoholic options if they're not drinking. So we're not trying to save the world, but we're trying to do our bit, and we're trying to do our best, and that means working with great ingredients. It means committing to some of the initiatives and the announcements that are happening for us over the next few weeks around our environmental stance and our kind of explicit, kind of vocal side of what we care about, love, and believe in around the natural world. So it starts with our ingredients. That's really, really important to us.
And I know you are working right now on creating more sustainable packing materials. Can you talk a little bit about what's been going on and some of the solutions that you're finding right now?
Yeah, so one of the projects was it was conceived this time last year, the big one, and was launched 3 months ago, Ben? Yeah, it was 3 months ago, which is our Mycelium Gift Box, which we're growing instead of making. So it's actually a mycelium mushroom-based solution, which is pretty fascinating. It's a fire retardant, temperature regulating, aquaphobic, so waterproof material, which takes 8 days to form and is actually using an agricultural waste material bound together by the root system of mushrooms in then it goes through a kiln. That creates this incredibly versatile product, which then, after it's been put outside, would biodegrade or biocontribute, because it actually improves the quality of the soil where it ends up, in 40 days. So it's completely shifting that mindset of creating packaging or a luxury gift box, which has an unfortunate, an unpleasant legacy to it. Once you've used your bottle, you then have this piece of plastic, this polystyrene sleeve. We've actually created something that completely disappears and can be removed from your environmental conscience because it's disappeared back into the soil and actually contributed.
I just think it's really fucking cool that we grow our gift boxes. You know, we grow our packaging and it takes 8 days. And it takes polystyrene 1,000 years to decompose. And, you know, the kind of this material, which we want everybody using, right? Everybody should be looking at this kind of substrate for their packaging solutions, because this doesn't just have to be gift packaging. You know, you can make, I've got a lampshade in my kitchen made out of this stuff. You can make shoes, you can make, it kind of mycelium everybody needs to look into, and there's manufacturers in the US, and we work with a brilliant company called Magical Mushroom Company in the UK, and you know it should just be on everybody's radar, and that will bring the cost down, and the more people use it, the better, because mushrooms are nature's best recyclers, and we need to look to nature more for these kind of solutions.
Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and good luck moving forward in 2021.
Thanks for having us.
So as we think about purpose, one of the things that I think is quite interesting is that so many companies are focused on driving as many transactions and as many product purchases as possible. And, you know, we kind of get caught in this conspicuous consumption kind of mindset. But, you know, I think there's a lot to be learned from curation and sort of considered purchases. And I'm really excited to be speaking with Carla Gallardo, co-founder and CEO of Kuyana, and really sort of diving into the thoughtfulness behind the way that they've constructed their brand. So thank you for joining us at Retail Innovation Week, Carla.
Thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure.
So at the core of Kuyana, you're promoting the opposite of conspicuous, which is conscious consumerism, buying fewer, better things. You know, if we think about the big challenges that the fashion industry specifically faces, you know, what are you kind of trying to sort of reconsider with the way that you've approached things with Kuyana?
Yeah, you mentioned, you know, a few things that really were the anchor of how Kuyana started. And I mean, it really centers around intentionality and making that the core value of our business. The consumer is used to buying more and thinking more is more. And really that's what the retail industry has done, right? To promote their products and sell more. But ultimately, there are just very few products around us that we truly love and use. And the Kuyana brand was built around that. It was built around fewer, better. You know, the challenges that the industry faces really are big when you think more is more. You know, supply chains are built to make a lot of product and then discard a lot of product. And consumers are taught to buy a lot and also then discard a lot. And that has a big impact on the planet. So there's a lot of learning and undoing that needs to happen to get to a place where the mindset of fewer, better, of being intentionally is actually embedded in the way that we shop and in the way that we sell.
That's fantastic. I love that sort of idea of, I mean, there's education that needs to happen on both fronts, from a sort of industry or, you know, sort of brand perspective, and then also from a consumer perspective. And so, you know, I think storytelling is a big component of, you know, how you've kind of structured your business. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the way that plays a role within the context of, you know, how consumers understand the value proposition that you're offering.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the when you look at how products are sold, price is always the kind of number one message out there. And that, when a customer finds a price that feels like that it's a good value, low price, you instantly have a high when you make that purchase, like, I got a deal. But that's not long lasting. And what storytelling does is actually build a connection with the customer that allows that high of that purchase to last for a long time. And that's our goal with storytelling, right? We make products with heritage. Our products are thought, every detail of our products are thought in the most special way. The stitching, the colors, the paint that we use, if any, the sourcing and the craftsmanship, and then that product has a story to tell, and it's a beautiful story to tell. And when we're able to tell that story and connect that customer to what she's buying, there's much more to be told about that story. And the cool thing is, once that product is bought by somebody, then there will be many more stories to be told, because that product will travel a new life. And so we like to think of a product as, having this long life cycle, and many times it should actually be owned by many different hands. And that goes again to the core of our practices, which is quality is key and the most important, because if we are able to make product that lasts, then that product will travel many, many lifetimes.
I love that as a way of thinking about business, which is that sort of the full product life cycle, which isn't just from sourcing to one consumer, but you're thinking about it, to your point, going from potentially being through various hands as it goes through. As you sort of think about that sort of initial stage, from the material sourcing and manufacturing, what are some of the things that you're doing there to improve that process?
So the number one focus that we just brought up to the forefront of our sourcing is on going to the countries that are experts in a material, and sourcing from those countries. And then step two is manufacturing in those countries as well, because it turns out that the expertise around how to make products with that material lies really close to that material. So you think of Italy and the micro industry of leather in Italy, or leather in Argentina, the craftsmanship, the years of heritage, right? The teaching from family to family, from father to son, all of that lies there. And so our number one goal, again, is quality. And for us to achieve that quality, we go to the source of where the material is best and where the making and craftsmanship is best. And we focus there to achieve that quality. There's a second component, which is sustainability. And so we're entering a new era where there's a lot of investment and R&D going into creating materials that are friendly to the planet, that don't damage the planet when those products end up in landfill, or that actually are upcycling materials that weren't friendly, like plastic, polyester. And so what we are now evolving into is being able to use and actually find those materials so that we can also make our contribution and not only create from scratch from raw materials. And so you'll see in our collections, we have responsible cashmere as part of our collections, traceable alpaca. We are using a lot of upcycled materials, and even we use our scraps to create products with our zero waste collections, where, if we use leather and there's scraps left, we'll use the scraps to actually create product and sell it to the customer at a really friendly price. So our goal is to just make the best, most high premium quality product, but also have very minimal impact on the planet.
That's incredible. I love the idea of this sort of notion of expertise and really having that at the core of how you're thinking about sourcing and creating those products. And it does create just such a really special story to tell. And then, the way that you talk about even, sort of creating special products that would have, never existed were it not for sort of thinking about that that sort of zero waste methodology. It's really incredible. And I know that there's, you've intentionally designed your products to be relevant, for multiple seasons. But I think there's, education plays a really interesting role within the way that you're talking to your customer. And specifically, when you think about helping her make smarter decisions about how she's utilizing a piece within her wardrobe. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that, really sort of works.
How we help her put together her wardrobe.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's we've benefited from having the ability to do this via our digital channel, but also through our retail channel, physical channel, right, where we're able to actually interact with her in a more intimate way. But the beauty of our collection is that when you look at our core products, they all form a really beautiful closet where all the products go with each other. So naturally, you can't go wrong, right? When you mix and match from our collection. But the second part that we really focus on is on actually putting a lot of investment behind creative and photography, so that we can inspire her to think of products in a different way. I'm wearing this blouse right now that, we can tie it in this way. We can wear it untied. We can tie it with a big bow. You can tuck it in, right? So we play with our photography to be able to give her inspiration so that she can then pick what's right for her. Because the one thing, right, that Kuyana is about is just versatility, and not every woman is the same. We make pieces that dress her up, not that take over her body. And so photography and inspiration are key. That said, we are just actually embarking on the next phase of wardrobing for Kuyana. We have so much information, so much data, and such a deep connection to our customer that we can actually have a more interactive experience with her online, built on actually a lot of the learnings from brick and mortar and retail. And I can't tell you a lot of what's going to happen, but there's a big effort and a lot of exciting stuff launching soon around wardrobing, where we're going to be able to actually make more impact in that phase of the shopping experience.
Oh, that's incredible. I think that's so amazing that there's, all of this information and learnings that you're taking from, the interactions that you're having with individual consumers, and then using that to continue to sort of grow and evolve your business. So that's really fantastic. So I guess just the last thing that I would love to just sort of understand is, you are sort of thinking things through all the way through to facilitating donation and resale as well. And maybe you can talk about how that functions within the context of the business too.
Yeah. Look, and I shared that, the product life cycle shouldn't end with one owner and then in landfill. So, we do two things at Kuyana. Number one is when you buy a product from us, maybe, you can clear out some of your closet and gift those other products to somebody else who will treasure them. So from the launch of our business, customers are able to donate their pieces. When they purchase from us, they can sign up for our Lean Closet program, where they would send us back a box of their clothing, and we would donate it to an organization that actually helps women who've gone through abuse. And the organization is called Heart, and is based in LA. So that was part one of giving products a second life. Now, part two, which we recently launched, is we've partnered. The second thing now is resale. And so now providing the opportunity to our customers to also be able to sell their pieces and give them a second life. Our goal, again, is we don't want product or clothing to end up in landfill. Product, is discarded without being used many times. And there's so many more lives that it can have. And so we're not only promoting customers to do that with their current products, but also with the Kuyana products by creating this new system, and then doing our part as retailers to actually produce quality product that can actually serve those different lifetimes.
That's amazing. You've clearly created such a thoughtful business model, and so many in every aspect of the product, the way that it's manufactured, the storytelling behind it, and how you're actually serving your customer has been really well considered. So thank you for sharing all this incredible information with us, and excited to keep an eye on Kuyana and what's going to be happening moving forward. So thanks so much, Carla.
We couldn't have pulled this event off without the support of our sponsors. First, we have Avalara, the leader in automated tax compliance. We've done a lot of work with Avalara over the past 12 months, and it continues the launch of a new report we are unveiling on day 4 of Retail Innovation Week. It is called Marketplaces and the Next Generation Digital Experience, Developing an Omnichannel Marketplace Strategy. The report was the inspiration for our Marketplace Day, and we hope you download your free copy. We'd also like to thank Gladly for their support. Gladly is the only people-centered customer service platform with all the channel built in. We also want to give a shout out to our Breakout sponsors. Chase Design is a world-class design firm established more than 50 years ago with over 100 employees. They work with consumer product goods companies and retailers worldwide on projects that span all shopper touchpoints, in the home, on the go, in-store, and online. Our sponsors. Real Obsess and Ridding Futures ran a session on Monday that tackled how to make the in-store experience available anywhere with AR and VR. Between them, they bring to the table technology, insights, augmented retail, and virtual shopping. We are also supported by Life Area, a full-service global customer experience and commerce agency. Their expertise lies in connecting brands and people through creative commerce experiences that transform and enliven the customer journey from start to finish. Much of what you will see on days 3 and 4 was filmed with our partner, Norbert. Norbert is a turnkey, all-in-one hardware and software solution you can deploy in hours. Thanks again to all of our sponsors for their support of Retail Innovation Week.
I'm really excited to speak with Kelly Cobb, who is the VP of Community and Giving at Bombas, who will help us understand how their mission has sort of evolved alongside the growth of the brand and some of the best practices that they use as they continue to evolve that mission. So Kelly, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
So as we kick off the conversation, it would be great if you could provide a little bit of background on Bombas for those in the audience that maybe aren't familiar with the brand, and more specifically, how the social mission comes to life.
Yeah, of course. Definitely one of my most favorite things to talk about. Bombas was founded when we learned that socks are the most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. And so our mission was really built into the foundation of our company from day one. We wanted to be able to solve this need, to be able to donate a pair of socks to folks experiencing homelessness for every pair purchased. And so what that means is that we really evolved into being a comfort apparel brand. And with every item that is sold, we're able to donate an item. And we work very closely with who we call our giving partners. Those are organizations around the United States that focus specifically on the needs of folks experiencing homelessness. So through them, and right now we have over 3,500 of them, which is really incredible, these amazing giving partners. We work very closely with them and also with folks experiencing homelessness to best understand their needs. And through those conversations and through our ongoing relationships, we've been able to develop a product for these specific customers in mind, our customers that receive our donation product. And we put as much thought and research and time into the creation of these products as we do for the ones that we sell on our website. So it's been amazing to see the evolution there. Of course, we started with socks and we've been able to donate over 40 million pairs to date. With the launch of our t-shirts, we've also been excited to develop a donation t-shirt, and with more consumer-facing product on the horizon, we're excited to continue being able to answer to some of the greatest needs that are coming out of the homeless community.
I love the fact that you've sort of talked about, and this has come up in other conversations that I've had today, is that that sort of research-driven focus in terms of both deciding how you wanted to, like, what the mission of the company was going to be from the outset, and then also in what the way you're talking about it is actually going out and engaging not only with the organizations but the folks that you're individually helping as well to understand how better you can sort of serve them ultimately. And I wonder, like, I think that's something that's really important for companies to understand is it's not like just slapping a mission on and sort of then moving forward, but like treating this as, you know, like something that's core to what it is that you do as a brand.
Yeah, I mean that's paramount. I think it's wonderful to see so many brands evolving to incorporate mission at this point in time. It sort of feels like something of a responsibility, and certainly we're very lucky to have it truly built into our DNA. I mean, it's genuine to our core. It permeates everything that we do. It's, you know, it's everyone at the company has a hand in our mission. It's not just the giving team. We don't exist in a silo, and we're lucky for that. But I think the thing that really keeps us going and our ability to evolve our mission is the fact that it is a focus of every person at Bombas, and the way that we most want to see it evolve, of course, is through the influence of our giving partners, the folks who are doing the very challenging work every day of helping to address the many complexities of homelessness, and our friends in our community across the United States who are experiencing homelessness. It feels super important to have them as some of our biggest stakeholders. Of course, you know, we need to be asking these questions and incorporating that into all of the things that we do to evolve the mission.
You know, what is the process and the sort of decision behind, like, as you expand that network, or how are you deciding when and who to bring on board in terms of those partners?
That's a really great question. And, you know, when we first started, we had one partner. Our first giving partner they're still our partner, but they're called Hannah Socks. And from them, we really learned how to effectively distribute socks. And since then, it evolved to one in every state, one in every major city. We were doing a lot of outbound outreach to build this network of partners. And then as more and more people started to know about Bombas and giving partners were talking to other organizations, we were getting a lot of applications, inbound applications every day from prospective giving partners. And at 3,500 partners, it's sort of been our upper limit at this moment. You know, we're at a place where we've been able to donate over 40 million pairs of socks to date. Our yearly inventory, unfortunately, isn't quite bottomless at this point, and the need is so great. So we've had to kind of temper need with our ability to provide an excellent customer experience, really thinking of not only our greater community of homeless individuals as our customers, but our giving partners as well, and wanting to make the relationship as straightforward and seamless for them as possible, making the donation something that is easy for them in every way. So right now, capping it at that 3,500 feels like the right way to be able to keep them as part of the Bombas family, ensure that our relationship feels a little bit more than transactional, which we definitely try to do. And as the brand continues to grow, of course, we'll look to see how we can expand upon that. But the partners that we have range greatly. It's, we could probably have 100 partners total that are enormous organizations and sort of like check it off and be like, all right, we did the thing, we donated the socks. But to us, that misses many individuals, and also a makeup of many different types of communities. So we want to be able to answer to the needs of the smaller, really grassroots initiatives that are working in small communities, maybe rural communities, maybe organizations that only see a couple hundred people every year, but that impact, even if it's a couple hundred people, that impact isn't any less for those individuals, versus a partner that might receive a million pairs of socks from us in a year. And that's what our largest partner receives. So a partner will receive anything between 1,000 pairs of socks and 1 million pairs of socks over the course of a year. And we work with them to best understand those needs. So maintaining that diversity and, diversity of clientele, folks that they serve and are supporting feels important as well.
You've talked about community, sort of at large already, and I wonder, how functionally or practically are you engaging with your community, whether that's the organizations themselves or the individuals or your customers, to just how does that look?
It's taken a variety of different shapes. Certainly right now it's evolved to be a little bit different, but in a lot of ways in really positive ways. Before the pandemic, we were engaging with our local community in New York City very often. One of the simplest ways that we do that is by having a large bin of our donation socks by the front door of our office, so that as folks come in and out, they can grab a pair. They're going out to pick up lunch or go to a meeting, they can bring the donation socks to be able to give them out to a person that they might meet on their commute or on their walk. And we offer the same to any guests that visit our office. And that's such a simple way of engaging, but one that continues to just really impress upon us the importance of our mission and of that individual encounter, a relationship. What can come out of that very simple exchange of recognizing a need in another person. But bigger than that are consistent, organized volunteer events that our team does internally. Generally, we would have between 7 and 9 every month, and we do them on a consistent basis. And that's to help us build a better relationship with the giving partner. They can really rely on us, and also build better relationships with the individuals that we interact with. And those volunteer events are, all different things, like throwing a monthly birthday party for kids at a family shelter, to doing street outreach, a whole bunch of different ways that we've been able to interact. And now, since so much is virtual, we have been able to maintain some in-person things in the city, but the virtual nature has allowed us to think a bit bigger in the ways that we can engage. One of the things we're focused on now is building out skills-based volunteering, which is using the inherent skills of our team members and allowing them to put them to great use on behalf of our giving partners, so that they can then, maybe it's weighing in on their marketing strategy, or helping them create a more impactful fundraising email, or helping with accounting, or different things, operations. And so that's been really neat, and also allows our fuller team to get involved in a bigger way. We also partner with a school here in the city. And so as they move to virtual learning, our in-classroom activities also moved to virtual. So we were able to create enrichment clubs and still continue to work with the students while offering something fun but educational. And so it's like all of these little silver linings, I think, that, the spark of innovation that just shows the ways that we can continue to expand. And beyond just our team, it's exciting when we can invite in other brands, other teams into our this volunteer world that we've created, and help other people feel that and experience that, and show how it can be built and replicated, in many different situations.
I love that we closed off with the importance of listening and communicating. I think that's something we could all benefit from. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, and really appreciate your time. Good luck with everything moving forward. Look to see what comes next.
Thanks, Scott. So nice to chat with you and all y'all out there.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
Community is obviously a huge component of any brand, particularly younger brands that are starting out and looking to grow their scale and impact. During the course of COVID, we've seen a lot of interesting ways that brands are stepping up to support their community, and very excited to have Helena Hambrecht here, who is the founder of the drinks brand House, to share some of her insights and things that they have been up to. So Helena, welcome, and thanks so much for joining me at Retail Innovation Week.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. So perhaps just as a sort of little bit of background, you can start off by talking about the House brand, what you are ultimately trying to accomplish, and where you're at sort of currently.
Sure. House is a booze company, which, there's a lot of those, but we set out to build the first digital first booze company that was focused on the drinker as opposed to a distributor or a bartender. It's something that's never happened before in the States. And as we had the idea for this company, it was based on the idea of why isn't there a better way to drink, and a way that really cared about the customer and what they needed, not just from the liquid itself, but the entire customer experience. And we launched about 1.5 years ago, and it's been going really well so far, even in 2020.
Maybe you can sort of talk just more generally about the ways that community plays a role in the growth of your brand.
Sure. I mean, we didn't really set out with the idea of like, how do we grow our community? Or, we didn't really think about it like that. We just wanted to make something that people wanted. And we're building something with a set of values that we really believed in, like better quality, authenticity, transparency, like, all of these things that we wanted in a brand. And we knew that people we knew wanted that. And some research implied that a lot of people might want this. And we just wanted to lead with our values, like we were building this for a legitimate reason to solve problems that we had. And we just had a feeling that it would attract people who shared those values. And I think because we've led with it so much from the very beginning, like we don't even talk about what House is that much. We talk about why we exist and the problems that we solve and how we're changing the industry. And those are the things that keep attracting customers. And that seems to be a really organic foundation that you really need to build the community the right way from the start. And it doesn't even stop at community, right? It bleeds into our employees and who we hire. And it's a good way to attract the people that you want to attract.
I like that idea of why as opposed to what. I think that just that like little transition makes like a huge difference just in how you kind of like approach and communicate. Just sort of following up on that a little bit is, I think, I have been in the past when everyone was able to be in one space, some of these, sort of gatherings that you as a brand have had, and then also, now we've shifted to this sort of remote context, and I wonder if you can talk about some of the sort of things that you found to be very effective just in terms of, engaging that community and continuing that conversation.
Oh yeah. I mean, isn't it wild that, we used to have parties and events and that stopped about 1 year ago. 2020 really forced us to kind of sit back and listen, right? Which I think is an underrated part of community building, or even company building, right? Like you've got to pay attention to what's going on with your customers. And 2020 was quite a going on, right? Like everybody was stopped in their tracks, like there's economic changes, there's behavioral changes, everybody's feeling horrible. And, the first thing that we did when COVID hit, other than shutting down our offices and not having parties anymore, was to really listen. And, part of that was having actual dialogues with our customers. We have a strategy team that talks to customers all the time, but also just paying attention to the world and, how are people spending their time now? Like, what is going to help them versus be a distraction? Like, how are they connecting with friends? Like, how are they creating rituals in their home that they're stuck in 24/7? Like, really observing and figuring out how can we just insert ourselves into what's actually happening and be helpful versus like try to force something on somebody when they don't want it. And that worked really well for us. I think we've gotten a lot of praise for just how we've carried the brand over the last year. And I think a big part of that is like we didn't want to force anything on anybody. We really wanted to pay attention to how people were living now. And if we fit into that, great. And if we don't, it's okay.
So early on in the pandemic, obviously many restaurants were struggling, and you created the Restaurant Project, which was something that really stood out to us for many reasons. I think one was the fact that how quickly it kind of came to market. and how vital and important it was. So if you could just take a minute and talk a little bit about the inspiration behind that initiative, and then how practically that became a reality so quickly.
Sure. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Restaurant Project was a line of 13 aperitifs that we launched with 13 different restaurants across the country when the pandemic was really hitting. And we would make booze for them, we'd sell booze for them, they co-created the recipes with us, and we'd give them all of the profit. We ended up giving about 200 grand to these restaurants. And, that's not necessarily a good for business move to go launch 13 products and give all the money away. But at that point, we were a couple of months into the pandemic, and we noticed that, e-commerce was up, alcohol was up, our business was up in general. And we kind of had this basic security of like, okay, we're not going to go out of business. So what can we do to help others in our industry, right? Like, we work in food and beverage, restaurants are a big part of that, and they were all in danger of closing. And we kind of, sat back and looked around, and we really wanted to figure out, like, what could we do that's unique? Like, what could we do with the tools that we have that could make maybe even more of an impact than just like a donation campaign? And, a lot of people don't know, we make all of our products ourselves. Like, my husband and his team literally make the booze. We have a warehouse, we have tanks, we have all this equipment. And so, we saw other companies turning their warehouses into, hand sanitizer factories. And something just kind of clicked where we were like, what if, we ask these restaurants if they want to make a booze with us, if they want to make an aperitif, they co-create the recipes with us, so they feel some ownership over it and they're really proud of the product. That's important to them. And then we can make it, we can sell it, and we can just give them all the profit. And, it's like not a super practical idea. And, Woody definitely was exhausted doing like 20-hour days for 2 months, making this happen. But I think more than anything, it just felt like the right thing to do. And it's kind of just good karma. And I think it was also a way, again, to really show people that our values are legit, because there's a lot of brands out, like values-led brands. It's kind of like a baseline now. And so there's a lot of talk, but the differentiator now isn't saying, that you're values driven, it's like actually living it. And so it really was our opportunity to just show that, we're not really a business that's maniacally focused on growth and money. And, like, of course we want to grow big because we want to make an impact, but we also want to do good things like constantly along the way. So, that's really why it happened.
What have you seen from consumers in terms of their response to the initiative?
They thought it was the coolest thing they'd ever seen, I mean, it was so fun for us, even just from an alcohol innovation standpoint, to make that many flavors with like ingredients chosen by these James Beard Michelin chefs, stuff that hadn't been used in booze before. And, this approach of like, what would this restaurant taste like in booze form? Like, it was so fun to push even those boundaries from a product perspective, and people loved that alone. And I think it just helped people get a better idea that there are real people behind the brand. It's not just some shiny, pretty thing that's like secretly made by a corporation. Like, it's actually people who give a shit and who want to take care of their friends, in the space. And yeah, I mean, we've never stopped hearing about it.
Amazing. And obviously what's so exciting about it is the fact that it's so, aligned with what it is that you're doing. You're just sort of like approaching it from a slightly different standpoint. Really appreciate you taking the time to, share with us today, and good luck going forward in 2021.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great series of experts. They really helped us understand topic of the day, understand the different ways to kind of think about the future of retail. I hope you've enjoyed the show today. We will be releasing the whole day as a video, and you'll be able to share that with colleagues, deep dive, and so forth. This is your host, Piers Fox, and we're excited to have you join us for today's breakout sessions. Welcome. While we wait for everyone to join us, I'm going to take a few minutes explaining the format, and then I'll run through who we have speaking at breakout sessions on day 3. Now in its third year, Retail Innovation Week brings together business leaders, change agents, and retail practitioners to engage in a week of conversation about the future of retail. Speakers at today's breakout sessions will help our community understand strategies that businesses can adopt to drive genuine social impact while growing business. Let's get my colleague Jeff Weiner to take us through how to get into each of the rooms.
You'll see here that when the event is live, you can visit the stage, you can visit sessions, and you can network. Let's take a look at sessions. So if we click over on sessions right here, you'll see that we have a number of different sessions to choose from. You can go into any of these sessions. You can jump around between sessions as well.
Jeff and his team will also be manning the chat box, so if you get lost or confused, just send a message. Okay, so who's speaking at the breakouts on day 3? Let's take a look. We are excited to have Stephanie Benedetto, CEO and founder at Queen of Ra, joining us to talk about the future supply chain. Over $120 billion worth of excess fabric sits in warehouses around the world, and these materials end up burned or buried if unused. Queen of Ra is a marketplace where you can quickly and easily buy unused fabrics online. Join Stephanie to deep dive into supply chain innovation and strategies to identify bottlenecks, minimize waste, and maximize profit. Racial injustice and the lack of inclusion became hot button topics for people around the world during the pandemic. But what can retailers do to make meaningful connections with conscientious consumers? Join Ezina Okoro, Chief Inclusion Officer of Wonderman Thompson, as she discusses how nimble and decisive brands can go beyond tweeting their support and dig into the hard work of making hiring and promotional practices fairer and more transparent. Target is grounded in its desire to help all families discover the joy of everyday life by working toward a healthier environment, more equitable world, and strengthening the communities it services. Listen in on a conversation between Sarah Hill of Target and 2 of its accelerator participants, Lime Loop, into the market about reusable shipping and ethical sourcing and manufacturing. In this session, you will hear from Adam Siegel, the founder of Recreate, and Peter Deering, founder and CEO of Peak Design, a community-first brand born from the second largest Kickstarter campaign, and a brand leader on a mission to fight climate change on its new branded e-commerce program. The pre-owned product market has experienced meteoric growth over the last decade and is projected to continue its significant growth in the next 10 years. It's no surprise that Gucci, Levi's, and other brands have recently announced their entry into resale. Now is the time for DTC brands to take a leadership role in the future of sustainable and circular fashion retail. When businesses and consumers unite to address climate change, we can create exponential impact for the planet. The current pandemic has underscored how interconnected our world has become, and that the health and well-being of our planet is deeply linked to that of our people. In this session, hear how socially minded brands can forge innovative partnerships and coalitions, fueled by cutting-edge technology, to inspire collective action to preserve the environment. This will include a spotlight on the recently expanded Priceless Planet Coalition, spearheaded by MasterCard, and innovative new tools from fintech startup Economy. Join Ishita Kabra, founder of By Rotation, the world's first social fashion rental app, for a conversation about fashion, community, and sustainability. As the founder and CEO of a young but fast-growing tech company, Ishita will be able to answer questions relating to entrepreneurship, technology, community, and sustainability. The next decade in the fashion industry will be met by increased resales, a growing sharing economy, a decline in customers, and an increase in users. Brands need to rapidly adapt if they are going to survive this transition. Join Natasha Frank, CEO of Ian, the leading IoT platform in fashion that powers product digitization for youths. Net-a-Porter, H&M, Waste Management, SAP, Microsoft, and more. Robin Along is founder and CEO of Lightbeam Communications, a boutique research and brand strategy firm based in New York City. She is an innovative researcher, and in this pre-recorded session, Robin will talk about consumer insights that she's tracking, especially around how people are responding to brands and retailers through the lenses of diversity and inclusivity. As consumers become more keenly aware of what authentic effort, ethos, or empathy looks like from brands, they're more intentional about buying and opting out of those that do not align with their values. Join Scott Lishutt and Lauren Lyons from PSFK to discuss how businesses are re-examining their messaging, practices, and offerings to meet the needs of consumers and employees alike. By prioritizing honesty in communications, sustainability in operations, and converting words into action, innovative businesses are building trust, creating connections, and providing meaningful support in an era characterized by purpose. Breakout sessions at Retail Innovation Week are a chance for our community to learn from experts with real experience in the field. Hey Jeff, can you repeat the instructions?
Let's take a look at sessions. So if we click over on sessions right here, you'll see that we have a number of different sessions to choose from. You can go into any of these sessions. You can jump around between sessions as well.
Jump